Where's the little baby?
Hmm?
Where's the little baby? Hello, BookTube. Welcome to your Daily Penguin, our tour through my Penguin Classic wall, and your daily glimpse of my little bean. uh, I wasn't going to do a Daily Penguin today. I wasn't going to make any videos of any kind today. And then I realized that doing that, disappearing like that, so soon after a weekend that was where I disappeared for bad reasons might worry some of you, so I thought I'd make at least a Daily Penguin uh, about a fantastic volume that I want to praise and recommend to you. It's this one from a few years ago. It's A Woman in Arabia, The Writings of the Queen of the Desert, edited by Georgina Howell, about Gertrude Bell. This is the letters of Gertrude Bell, and Georgina Howell's name will be familiar to you because she wrote a great biography of Gertrude Bell. Bell was comfortably situated. She was well-to-do. She was well-educated. She had a particular knack for languages. I'm perfectly willing to admit. I always urge everybody to try to learn another language, at least one, rather than go through life as with just the one language. I always try to urge people to do that, and over the years I've had many people say, well, it just feels like I don't have a knack. It feels like something just isn't there in the chemistry of my brain to do this. I hesitate over finalisms like that, but there might be something to it. Certainly, Gertrude Bell, if there is such a knack for languages, Gertrude Bell had it because she picked up lots of languages in her life. And she did lots and lots of things. Traveled a lot. Was a literal pathbreaker when it came to mountaineering. Logging new ascents and new routes that no one had found before, man or woman. And she traveled often across Arabia, across Greater Arabia, and got to know lots and lots of people. She was a fierce kind of personality with a booming laugh and a way of being inquisitive about you in a conversation that felt not only real but elevating. It was many people in the course of her travels, common people, tradesmen, royals in Arabia, had similar reactions to their interactions with her, which is that for some odd reason that they couldn't quite put their finger on, it felt like an honor to talk with her over dinner. And as odd as it sounds, that reaction was a variation of that, taking into account differences in language and differences in culture. A variation of that reaction was also almost universal among people in England who knew her. She was, in other words, a totally remarkable person. And this is Penguin's second collection of her letters. The first collection was done a long time ago, and it was mostly distaff. That first collection was mostly the kinds of things that a censorious family member, an older female censorious family member, would consider proper in a collection of letters from what they still refer to as a young woman. This is a different kind of collection, much better, much broader, and I applaud it for that. I wrote about this years and years ago when it first, I think this came out in 2016. Actually, does this tell me? 2015, this came out. I know that at the time that this came out, I still had Open Letters Monthly, the literary journal where I was the managing editor, was still Open Letters Monthly. It hadn't become Open Letters Review. And I was doing a series about Penguin classics, Penguins on Parade, which someday I would like to turn into an ebook. And one of the gimmicks of Penguins on Parade, I did thousands, or hundreds anyway, of entries along those lines. And one of the gimmicks for Penguins on Parade was to finish off the entry by showing my Basset Hound Lucy with the book. Leading some people to think that she was extremely well read as a Basset Hound. Actually, she was quite arrestingly stupid. Endearingly so, but still. And if I can, I will find that piece about this book and link to it down below. Although, once again, I point out, if you're curious to know if I've written about something, whether it's new or old, in any kind of genre at any time over the last however many hundreds of thousands of years. Just type in my name and the name of the book in Google. That's what I do. It'll help you to find things. And the things that you find may not be formatted correctly. They may be a jumbled mess. Several websites that I've written for over the decade have packed up shop and are only archived in haphazardly. And also Open Letters Monthly is still only archived haphazardly, with lots and lots of curatory work to be done that hasn't been done. So we'll see. The first thing to suffer from that kind of change is pictures. So if you don't see a picture of Lucy with this book, well, there was one somewhere. But anyway, I applaud the existence of this volume in Penguin Classics. I applaud the fact that they updated it and that they got Gertrude Bell's foremost biographer to write the introduction. That really pays off. The introduction is wonderful. The notes are wonderful. But there's a but. There's a however coming up. And that is that this is not enough. This is the letters of the what is it called? The writings of the Queen of the Desert. Let's see what's in here. We have a woman in Arabia. Okay, and then we have different sections called the linguist, the poet, the person, the mountaineer, the archaeologist, the desert traveler, the lover, the prisoner, the war worker, the intrusives, the nation builder. That it refers to the pivotal role that he played in the founding of Iraq, and the political and royal maneuverings of King Faisal. The courtier, and then finally an epilogue. And as you can tell from those broader subject group headings, this book draws on more of Gertrude Bell's own writings than the original Penguin Classic Letters of Gertrude Bell did. But it doesn't draw on enough. This book could be 3 times as long. And I think, of course, Georgina Howell is exempt from blame when it comes to this, but as an institution, Penguin Classics as an institution, I believe this volume may be a vestige of old pre-1950s institutional sexism, where if you have a figure like Gertrude Bell, the thing you'll probably do will be either a collection of letters, or if she wrote a book about interior decorations, so much the better. As opposed to what you would do for her exact contemporary and a person who is, if anything, less impressive than she is, Lawrence of Arabia. Gertrude Bell wrote Arabian Diaries. She wrote a book, essentially, that would, if put together, be much longer than this selection. And you don't see a figure like Lawrence of Arabia being treated that way. You certainly don't see a figure like Winston Churchill. And both Lawrence and Churchill thought that Gertrude Bell was towered over them in terms of intellect and culture and experience. And you don't see that kind of treatment with them. You would never in a million years see, Winston Churchill, a man in government, the writings of Winston Churchill, the blowhard of the desert. You would never see a volume this thin for such a thing. Never. And never for Lawrence of Arabia. Gertrude Bell was essentially Gertrude Bell of Arabia. Even decades and decades after she died, you could travel in places where she had been, and her memory was being kept alive, generation by generation, and not negatively, as is usually the case with visiting Westerners, not negatively. So I guess I very much recommend this volume. It is the introduction of Georgina Howell really into the mix really makes this, really sells this as a volume, and I recommend her book Queen of the Desert. And also I would recommend, if you're interested in the period, if you're in it, you should be, because it's the creation of one of the most volatile areas in the world today. If you're interested in that area, I would suggest that you read about T.E. Lawrence. If you don't read his book, you should read his book 7 Pillars of Wisdom anyway, even if you're not interested. But if you're interested, read a biography of him. Read Queen of the Desert, a biography of Gertrude Bell. There was just recently, about 10 years ago, a big, fat, wonderful biography of King Faisal. You should read that as well, to learn about the time period through the lives of these people. But what I'd like, ideally, later on down the line, is a much bigger version of this book, or keep this book because this version is really good, and give us another volume of the writings of Gertrude Bell. She wrote a lot in her life and was never anything other than readable. She actually had that in common with Winston Churchill and Lawrence of Arabia, was that she was a hell of a writer. A truism that was said of both Churchill and Lawrence of Arabia and one other writer at the time, who we'll get to in this Penguin Classic tour. A truism that was said of them when they were still alive at the time was that we would know their names anyway, even if they hadn't done anything. Even if Lawrence of Arabia had not become Lawrence of Arabia, even if Churchill had not gone on to save his country. We would still know about them just for their writings, because their writings are that good. Same thing is true of Gertrude Bell, but where's the representation? You don't have much Churchill representation in Penguin Classics, I suspect, because of very live property copyrights. And again, this question comes up. I don't think there is a standard American-printed, black-spine Penguin Classic of Seven Pillars of Wisdom by Lawrence of Arabia. And I think that's a shame. There should be. There should be penguins of his translations as well. And there should be at least another big volume of Gertrude Bell. These were people who didn't live by half measures, especially Gertrude Bell. And yet, this is, I believe, the whole extent of her representation in the Penguin Classic line. And I don't think, for instance, Freya Stark is represented at all in Penguin Classics. These vestiges of an early 20th century institutional sexism need to go. And I'm not saying that as a shaved side of the head, blue checkmark Twitter scold. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that as a student of history and a reader. It's long since time that we stopped with this kind of lopsided parody nonsense. It's long since time that we did. Why is there as far as I know, no Penguin Classic of Mary Kingsley's books on traveling in Africa? They were massive bestsellers. They were incredibly influential. They are newsworthy in many different ways. Why aren't they there? Why are we looking for Freya Stark? Why are we seeing Gertrude Bell represented in Penguin Classics in a pretty little nosegay of selected writings? Why? That implies that sorry, I don't mean to rant, and I'll wrap this up. I'm not accusing anyone at Penguin Classics editorial board. I'm saying these things can be viral. They can continue long after the people who originated them are gone. The idea at the beginning of the 20th century, 100 years ago, was that women are most accurately represented by little picks and pieces here and there. They keep little journals. They have little flights of fancy. They have little ideas. They don't produce masterworks. They don't produce long works of studied intellect and history. They don't do that sort of thing. It's not really what we go to them for. That was prevalent thinking 100 years ago. And it's ridiculous. And it always has been ridiculous. So I guess this is definitely a recommend. This is absolutely a recommend. It's a wonderful, lovely volume. But it's also a recommend for me I would recommend that you make a more extensive acquaintance with Gertrude Bell, especially through her writings. Whether Penguin makes them or not, they exist and they can be found. So that is your Penguin Classic for today. I didn't want to not see you at all, but there aren't going to be any other videos today. Just your Daily Penguin. And the reason I want to hurry to stress that the reason is not negative. The reason is just work. Sometimes work piles up suddenly, ninja style, and then it needs lots of attention. So on a day like that, I can't justify 2 hours of talking to you, plus, really, let's be honest, another hour of fussing to make sure the videos are uploading, to add links and information, or if required, or anything like that. There are days when that just isn't possible. I like to think that I manage my freelance life well enough so that those days aren't often, but they do occasionally happen. So I'm going to wrap this up for now. This will be our only talk today, but tomorrow I hope to be back with many more videos to bore the pants off you because you shouldn't have pants on. I don't. Why should you? So anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.